Hey everyone, how are you going? It is Simon here, and thanks very much for tuning in this video. I'm here with the fantastic Michael Carpenter.
Hello, I am the fantastic Michael Carpenter.
And we're going to have a little bit of a chat today about tube amps, how they work. We've got a variety of things behind us, you can probably see. Let's go. So, where are we going to start?
I think we should start to talk about the concept of tube amps in 2022 and the validity of it. There's a lot of things about tube amps. There's things out there in the world that people will say, you can only do this, you can only do this, and you can only play that guitar into that amp, and emulations are bad, and digital amps are bad, and there's so much information out there from purists about things. I run a recording studio. I'm a gigging musician, have been a gigging musician now for 40 years, and I'm very aware of what works and what doesn't work. And so we can just dive in and just talk generally about some of that stuff.
That's right. So I guess the number one thing here is I thought I would break the rules immediately.
As you do.
By going for the Les Paul into a Fender Deluxe Reverb.
Shock horror.
Now,
wait a minute, Simon. You're not supposed to do that, are you?
No, you're not supposed to do that. So if you go on any forum, because often I get asked when people are buying stuff, what kind of amp do I need for the guitar I have? And it's a bit of a fraught thing. So, number one, little practice amps are awesome.
Little practice amps are good. I mean, the amp that I'm playing through is a little Vox Super Beetle non-valve amp. How can I even get a decent usable sound out of it? I use this thing for gigs. It's fine, it's light, it sounds great, and it reminds me of my old AC30 that I had for many, many years that sounds amazing, which is a tube amp, one of the classic amps of the rock and roll idiom. And it sounds kind of like it, but weighs about 1/10 of it. And I'm old and don't want to carry a big old...
In fact, you have heard that Vox if you've just watched the intro of this video, because I'm playing a Gretsch Project into the AC30.
There you go.
In the intro music.
I think regarding you playing, your beautiful gold top into Deluxe. That's beautiful. Anyway,
this bad boy.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on because I've got guitar envy over there. I think that there's a lot of misinformation about you can only do this, and I've had a lot of years of asking questions. Well, why? I don't really understand why. If you can only do this. Now, that's not to say that there aren't proven things that work.
Yeah.
And it is tricky out there for the novices to kind of weed through the good information and the less good information. But if you've got a guitar that is set up well, and then you play into it well, and you know the guitar well, you know where the bridge pickup is supposed to sound and how the middle position is supposed to sit, and you know your guitar well, you can probably make most amps kind of work. As long as the amps are serviced and working well and functioning, you'll be able to find your tone. I mean, the conversation of the tone is in your fingers, I don't think it's just in your fingers. You can't make, a Les Paul sound necessarily like a Tele or a Strat or anything like that, but there is a big component to that. I think the idea of being able to, as long as you've got a good amp that you know works, and a guitar that you know works, then I think that you need to relieve yourself a little bit of, I can only play this through that.
Yeah. So something I've been on a sort of, I hate the word, but a journey with was I always wanted a vintage amp. And I was fortunate about 5 or 6 years ago to buy this 1967 Fender Deluxe amp.
Quite an amp.
It's awesome. I love this amp. And, does it sound better to me than the modern Deluxe reissues? Yes, it does. But is it 20 times better? No.
Well, no. And this is the thing we get in here all the time. We get it with microphones and drum kits and guitars and stuff like that. People wanting to only sing into a vintage U87 or a U47, but they're not necessarily at the skill level where they're appreciating the fine differences between that. I've gone the other way, of course. I always wanted to have vintage amps, bought vintage amps, and now I don't own any vintage amps because...
And they are a pain sometimes.
Well, they can be difficult, and they can be difficult. And I want to qualify that. They can be a pain sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Like every piece of gear, like guitars, and if we use them, they're gonna wear out and need to have things addressed. But for me, I spent a lot of time just doing festivals where you turn up and whatever amp you've got.
Yeah,
and often what you will get on festivals. And I'm an AC30 guy. I've never really been a Fender guy. I've always been a Vox AC30 guy. Even in studio world and stuff like that, that's my default position. But I've played through so many clapped out AC30s at festivals. And you know what you do? You get on with the job and get it done. So I went from having good vintage amps to having no vintage amps and using emulators and smaller valve amps and things that I just know are going to be easy to move around.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that, the more technology moves on as well, really. So I've played guitar on records that Michael's been recording, and I've gone, where do I put my amp? And he goes, we're not going to plug into that today. You're going to plug straight into this. Yeah. And I initially was like, oh my God. And you come out and you hear it on the record, and when it's on the record in
the context
amongst
things,
everything, there's no way anybody could have picked that out.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the most important aspects of kind of learning to be a guitar player and finding your voice is identifying the things that you love in other people's records, identifying the things that you relate to in your playing, and then kind of finding the combination of things that work so that you know that when you pick up any guitar, you'll see there's a lot of guitars in this room. I've got all these different guitars, and generally on pretty much all of them, I sound like me. Yeah. Now, of course, there's tonal finesses to it and stuff like that. But I think the more you understand your own abilities and the things that you like, the more you'll gravitate towards gear that makes sense in your world. I've recently become a Fender man. So I bought a deluxe reverb, but the Tone Master version, the digital emulation of the classic amp. And having worked with lots and lots of old deluxes, this digital emulation of a vintage Fender amp is unreal. It sounds great, but to qualify that, I've spent a lot of time with the real thing, getting to know how it works and where you need to put the knobs and stuff like that. So I think we need to liberate ourselves from you can only do things this way. I think that's a trap.
That's right, and I guess that's what I wanted to talk about today, really, because a lot of people go, I've got a Telecaster, that means I have to buy a deluxe. Or I've got a Gibson, therefore I have to buy a Marshall. Or, and I think they all sound different. So just go and try. Don't be afraid to take your guitar into the guitar store with all of your setup and go, okay, I'm here to buy an amp. What have you got? So that you know exactly what it's going to sound like when you get home.
That's a really, really important thing you just said there. I think that as guitar players, as musicians in general, we're constantly refining our situation. So, how many different variations this month have you gone through your pedal board?
I was going to say this is iteration 17,464.
That's right. So what you do is you take the things that you know. So you might have your Telecaster or your Les Paul or your Gretsch or whatever that you know is ground zero for your tone. Then you do take it into your guitar shop and you say, I'm about to spend a lot of money on an amp. I want to hear my rig, my pedals. Any decent guitar shop will facilitate that. And if the guitar shop doesn't, go and find another guitar shop.
There's plenty of shops.
There are plenty of great shops out there that will facilitate that. And what you're doing there is you're taking a little Victories approach to refining your sound. You're taking the things that you know well and then going and matching it up. And that's
100% from experience where I've gone and buy an amp and I've gone into the guitar shop and I've got, okay, well, I play a Telecaster. There's a Telecaster. Pick the Telecaster for 4. Play that amp in the shop. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to buy the amp. You get home, your Telecaster is different to that Telecaster. It doesn't sound as good. Yeah.
I think that there's nothing... And look, people will get self-conscious about the idea of taking their rigs into shops. There will be some shop guys who'll go, oh, do you have to do that? We've got Telecasters here. I think we're allowed as musicians to express ourselves and exert ourselves and just kind of go, well, I'm about to spend money on this thing. I want to be sure it's the right thing.
That's right.
And it's a massive difference. If you go to your guitar shop and you take your Telecaster or Gretsch or whatever and your pedals and you go Fender, Vox, Marshall.
Yeah.
Man, there's 3 different stories there, and you need to find out which one is the one closest to what you want to say.
Yeah, I guess it's exactly what you want it to sound like. Like for me, like this sort of that is. I love the sound of
I've known Simon for a very, very long time, and I can remember on the first projects that we did together, you were chasing that sound back then, but you did not have that worked out. So Simon spent a lot of time over a long period of time refining the things that he wants, and that's both as on a Les Paul or a Telecaster or whatever you play. And by the same token, for me, there's something about Vox amps, like I said, that just
does it for you.
Do a thing for me, and there's a combination of even through the little. There's a throatiness about it that, with the way that I play, just makes really good sense. So it's been quite an adventure for me, and there's a conscious thing for me to be playing into the Fender Deluxe Tone Master thing now, because I want to challenge myself to see if I can make a noise that makes sense to me. So I'm taking different guitars to gigs and seeing how it feels, and so far it feels pretty good, and I feel a better musician from having that information in my brain now.
Sure.
Right, I know that I can make my sounds work on a Fender Deluxe.
All right. Okay, so to wrap it up, what are our points? If you're going to go and buy a new amp, I reckon take your stuff into the shop with you. If you're a bit nervous about doing that, maybe call them up first and say, hey, I want to come and try amps. Is it okay if I bring my own guitar in with me? Like, surely that would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've done that heaps of times, by the way.
Point number 2, be careful of the information that's out there on the internet that is definitive. I'm always suspicious of anybody that just says, this is the only way you can do it. There are countless versions of classic, iconic guitar sounds that we've heard that go against what everybody says that you can do. So I would say, take in all the information, but the best way for you to work out what works for you is your ears, your fingers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, like, I've matched things up in really different kind of ways, mainly because I've gone, what does that sound like into that? And you go, right, I've just stumbled on something that speaks to me that isn't a traditional way of doing things. So be skeptical, take on the information, but don't read anything as gospel. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a great example of that in my sort of experience is fuzz pedals. Oh,
right, so the one I've got on the moment on my board is like I'm going to go for at least the 10th different fuzz pedal I have tried. And I finally got there. And I tried all sorts of things, and I read lots of stuff on the internet, and because I love the kind of this early 70s fuzz sound that you hear on some of the Temptations records. It's quite niche, but that's what I was going for. And you finally get there, and it sounds, and it kind of doesn't go forever, and it craps out. I love that. I mean, this isn't the right kind of situation guitar-wise. I'd usually be using a Telecaster, but like... Please do subscribe. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And we will see you next time. There's about 600 lessons here on my channel, so go and check one of those out.
They're good.
I know, we're getting the hang of it.
Starting to get the hang of it,
Yeah, after all these years. So, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Big thanks to Michael.
Happy to be here, Simon.
Having the room, like,
what a room.
Awesome is it? Hey? See you guys. Bye for now.